I'm going to start the recording and we can call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Statistical Modeling and Analytics Research Tools Committee in South Kingstown, Rhode Island. The date is July the 2nd, 2020, and the time is 7:04. We're going to start with a roll call. I'm going to start with the folks I see on my screen from the upper left. Henry Thayer.
Yep, Henry Thayer.
Jason Ralph.
Jason Ralph.
Susan Marcus.
Susan Marcus.
David Ferrando.
Bernardo. Here.
Bernardo. Sorry.
Bernardo.
Bernardo.
There you go.
Jonathan Bailey LaBelle.
Yep, here.
And Kristen Johnson are all present.
I have finally gotten my video, audio, text stuff figured out.
That's
Never
good.
easy.
The next item on the agenda would be the approval of meeting minutes. I'm going to share these meeting minutes, so if there are any edits to be made, we can make them together. So, everyone is seeing the meeting minutes? Draft minutes for the April 28th meeting? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Any changes, modifications, or concerns about the meeting minutes?
I think Kristen Johnson was there.
Yep.
That would be an issue. Spelled correctly? All right. A bit after this, but I think we'll fix it. Other items on the agenda, on the meeting minutes that need to be adjusted? And with that, then I would take a motion to accept the meeting minutes for the meeting of April 28th, 2020. Or April 28th, 2020.
Okay, motion to accept the minutes. Need a second?
Motion.
Second.
The second was by?
Aye.
Aye.
Was the second by? Henry Thayer making the motion, and the second was by whom?
David.
Kristen.
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 Any opposed? The meeting minutes are approved, and I can stop sharing my screen. All right, next on the agenda is, pull up the agenda. Correspondence and public comments. There are no members of the public that I see in attendance, and we have received no correspondence to the committee. So we can move on to discussion. Committee governance is the next item on the agenda. We've dealt with this to some extent, but Henry Thayer had sent some materials in to me, which I was able to get out just a few minutes ago to the committee. So you should have them in your email, but I can also share them either on my screen, Henry, or you can take care of it.
Okay, can you share that PowerPoint, Rob?
I can do that.
Okay.
And I'm going to share this at this point.
Okay.
I'll be seeing my desktop. So Henry, I'll happily go through this, flip through this as you. By way of introduction, Henry had sent me this PowerPoint presentation. Actually, I received it today or yesterday? Today. But I had received notice that he had been contemplating putting this together a couple of days ago. Henry is keenly aware, I imagine as everyone else is, that my office has been absolutely flat out on a bunch of different things. And Henry was moved to put together this PowerPoint presentation in the interest of providing some sort of administrative and just institutional structure and support to the SMART committee. The idea here being that Henry would be willing to accept some responsibility for coordinating meetings and working with Colleen to make sure that meetings get posted appropriately, follow up on a regular basis, that sort of thing. Is that a fair summary of the motivation, Henry?
Yeah, you know, I was just just looking at how flat out your office was, and after some consultation with Larry, the other one thing that I wanted to put forth is that since I have some time now, I wanted to put forth that I'd be willing to act as chairman, if so nominated, and I'd do it, you know, just as long as one, I was able to do it, or two, that at the pleasure of this committee. And in so doing, Rob, can you go to the second slide?
Sure thing.
Second.
Beyond that,
Yep.
this slide,
Slide number 2.
that's slide number 1. This is slide number 2.
No.
No.
No,
Page
still
down.
one.
This is slide number 3.
No, we're still looking at the title slide.
Okay, there's just a lag or something then because,
Oh,
There we go.
There we
okay.
go.
Two.
There it is. Okay, so my thoughts are, in terms of governance, first of all, like every other committee in this town, we operate under Robert's Rules of Order. And a chairman, typically of one of these advisory committees, is elected by the committee for a 1 year or 2 year term, and it can be re-elected. There is no term limit, but basically maintains order in the meeting, sets the agenda, and ensures agenda and minutes are published, and makes reports to the town council. Very simple. There's a lot in there that would be done, that is done in the background by Colleen and Rob, as far as compliance with state laws and the publishing of minutes and agendas on the appropriate websites that I assume would still go on. The committee should have a vice chairman, and it substitutes for the chairman when he or she is unavailable. But one thing that I put on there, usually our committees have secretaries, but I called it a secretary or a chief technologist, and that person would maintain the technology stack for reporting purposes.
Just a question that while I was reading this, that term is not one that I'm familiar with. What is a technology stack?
Technology stack means the data that we're collecting and analyzing. You know, what servers is it going to be on? What database engines are we going to use? What types of queries are we going to build? Where is all of that to be stored? The town does own a number of servers, especially in the school system. And these servers do have adequate space. The other thing too is we should utilize cloud computing to you know, store a lot of databases up there to allow for committee members, or if necessary, the general public to gain access to the data. So really what I'm asking for in there, Rob, is whoever Secretary Chief Technologist is, that person be aware of what the infrastructure looks like on the town systems and understand what the technology stack is that we have to work with. Okay? Rob. Rob,
Yes,
can you hear me?
yes, I can. Yep, that was clear. I understand what you're looking for there.
Oh, okay. So any discussion about this?
I mean, we had talked about doing a rolling chairmanship at some point. Any thoughts on that? Because there wasn't anyone willing to kind of step up and.
Yeah, well, I thought about it, and after the events of the past couple of weeks, and with the coronavirus and everything Rob's office is going to go through, I'm willing to step up and do it.
Okay.
I really thought about this, and I think that I have the time to do it. Number one. Number two is I do have some contacts in the town regarding information technology and accessing databases.
The only thing I would say is I think an unlimited term is a bad idea. Maybe re-elected is fine, but I do think, I mean, I sit on a committee where the same chairman has been there for 30 years or something, and it's not healthy. Anybody who knows anything about governance of nonprofits or even profits knows that you have to have you need a little changing it up. So I would say elect for 1 or 2 terms, but it should be limited. There should be.
Yeah, Susan, what I like is to align it with the council. We elect a new council every 2 years. And the question is, what is your pleasure, council men or women? And go from there. I think that people staying there forever and ever and ever and a day doesn't allow us to scramble the eggs, so to speak. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I think it's important that we scramble the eggs every so often.
What your note doesn't say anything about when the terms would start, and I don't think it needs to. The chairman is not serving at the pleasure of the town council, so I don't think that particularly matters. It could start as soon as we decide this is what we want to do, if that's what we do. But I do think it should be. I think it should have a limit.
Yeah.
I will note that if we're really talking about a governance structure, the governance should come within the committee, not be from the town council based on committee appointment. And so that's, I think, consistent with Susan's concern is perhaps just the clear delineation of the temporal dimensions of a term and then the reappointment. I just want to put a second note in here, which is I'm not sure if it's consistent throughout the town, but I'm not sure if we could just use the word chair, which is much more appropriate than the gendered language that's used here. I realize that that's a typical way that this is referred to, but it is really antiquated. So I just like to suggest that we include that as well.
Yeah, that's.
Well, Kristen, I'm a little antiquated. So.
Yeah.
So I think as a convention, that's understood. I think you're right. So just, Henry, on a couple of things. First of all, thank you. I appreciate the sentiment. I appreciate the fact that you're willing to step up. I do appreciate your observation that my office is just flat out right now. There's no doubt about it. And it's hard to know how long this is going to last. We are going to see consequences of what's happening in the Sun Belt right now hit Rhode Island at some point in the future. And we're going to see the consequences of coronavirus behavior, which is the family seems to, take vacation in the summers and come back with a vengeance in the fall. So I do think that we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, and coronavirus is going to continue to occupy more of my time than I'd like, for sure. and is going to keep us distracted for the remainder of this year. I think that
Oh, yeah.
we're not out of this, certainly in 2020. So I appreciate your observation. I do think that it would be helpful to have somebody on the committee who is doing things like checking to make sure that the posting is done when it's supposed to be done for the Secretary of State. I think it would be helpful for somebody to make sure that the meeting minutes are prepared and are ready for the committee, you know, a week, ideally, before the meeting. Those sorts of things are very helpful. So I appreciate your willingness to step up.
By the way, Rob, can I interrupt you? I noticed nobody has been responsible for preparing the minutes in this list.
There isn't. Traditionally in South Kingstown, which is unusual, traditionally in South Kingstown, town staff have done that. And I'm not asking this committee to break with that tradition, though I will note that that is unusual. In most places that I've been before, meeting minutes are produced by the secretary of the committee. They're reviewed by staff, but they're produced, the initial meeting minutes are produced by the member of the committee who is responsible for the duties of the secretary. So Henry hasn't, I haven't coordinated this presentation. Henry made this production. I understand why it would be absent because his experience with other committees in town would have had that function being performed by the town staff. And I'm not asking this committee to deviate from a well-established tradition here in South Kingstown. I have mixed opinions about whether that's the best way for meeting minutes to be produced. I think that there is always a little bit of editorial license that is given to the reporter of any meeting. And I sort of prefer to have a committee member being the reporter as opposed to staff, but that's not what the tradition, that's not what the habit has been here.
Can I just throw a comment in? Just want to say thank you to Henry for stepping up, because at our last meeting, last couple of meetings when this has come up, nobody's really jumped to the fore to be willing to do this. So appreciate you taking the initiative to put this together and to offer up your services.
Thank you.
Yeah, it might be good. I agree with what David just said. It might be good if we can read this governance document that Henry came up with. But in general, yeah, nobody really wanted the job. And I think Henry could be capable. He's been involved in things. And so, you know, it might be, you know, maybe a year and we do a check-in in a year.
Well, we certainly would be likely to be more efficient, I think.
Yeah.
Shall I go through the next slide, Henry?
Yes, please. Okay, I wrote a mission statement. Now, mission statements are always, you know, highly subjective, but I wrote this just off the top of my head, and I only thought about it for about 5 minutes. So this mission statement of the committee is something that really needs some development. And
Henry, that the mission statement was addressed in the meeting minutes at the last meeting. So there is actually a statement in the meeting minutes.
okay,
Pull from.
so what we can do is take that mission statement and cut and paste it right into here.
Yeah, that's good, because a mission statement shouldn't say anything about how often we meet.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Coordination with other committees. I mean, right off the top of my head, I see the Economic Development Commission. I see the Planning Board. I see the School Committee. And I see the Council. And when I wrote others there, I should have put a question mark of what other committees we need to coordinate with. But those came right off the top of my head.
Maybe affordable housing.
Yeah.
Yes, affordable housing for sure.
Right, Rob, can you put that in there, please?
But then what, that you could also, I mean, this is just kind of a list of all the town committees. You could also say something about sustainability, because actually some of what we might do would pertain to that too. So this raises for me the question of, what do you mean by coordination with other committees?
Mhm.
If we just need to say we're one of the town committees, then I don't think we need this.
It's actually, I think, Henry, what you're getting at, and what the conversation of the group in the past has been, is really more collaboration than it is coordination. It's working with, as opposed to.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to just say the range of town committees, or instead of listing them? Given that I can see that there would be, Henry, I think you have a really good point, that there are certainly ones that we would be more useful for, but that it ought not be exclusive.
No, it absolutely shouldn't be exclusive. That's why that when I wrote others on the bottom,
Yeah.
should have a question mark next to it. And we can say other committees as indicated, or other committees as required, or.
Well, can we come back to this after we see the rest of it? Because this could just be a function, this is just sort of a function of the committee, that one of the things we do is collaborate with other groups in town.
Okay. This next slide, I talked about data repositories, and data can come from multiple databases. I wrote in there the census data, tax rolls, the school system, town departments. Each of the town departments I know keeps statistics on whatever they're doing, public safety, building permits, zoning, and administration. So data can come from multiple locations. And I keep stressing this technology stack. When I talk about ETL, what that means is extract, transfer, and load. What is available? What database engines and servers does the town have? Does it have Oracle? Does it use DBase? Does it use Microsoft Access? I don't know. And the question is, what does the town's IT infrastructure look like? Because we have to have engines to be able to create the data that we want to analyze.
Right. So some of this is going to be easy to sort of tackle. It'll be relatively easy for the committee to request and receive a description of the publicly accessible data in the police department, in the EMS, in the dispatch office, in the building permits office. That's easy enough. And it'll be easy for the committee to gain access to those publicly accessible data sets. Some of this is going to be problematic. Understanding the IT infrastructure is going to raise questions about security of our data. So there's going to be some issues that have to be worked through there before the committee is going to have sort of a map of our data infrastructure.
Rob, who's the IT manager for the town?
Lori Fox.
Yeah, is it possible she could brief us?
It's possible, but I want to have that conversation with Lori before she comes out and starts talking about this stuff. I mean, quite honestly, what you're looking for, particularly if we're doing it on a Zoom meeting, is information that I'm reluctant to have available publicly.
Well, the census is available.
Yeah, but the census isn't telling us how they're storing their data and what they're using for.
Yeah, they did. I worked for the Department of Commerce for 6 months on a contract job. I've seen this data.
Yeah, you were a contractor.
Yeah. And the census data is for South Kingston is all spreadsheets.
Yep.
And the tax rolls, that's public information. The school system, I know they keep data on, how many kids, how many square feet. it is generally public data.
So it's a perfectly appropriate thing to ask, what's the structure of our data sets? What's in the data? What are the elements in each data set? That's
Yes.
an appropriate thing to ask. The data infrastructure speaks to things like firewalls and
No, don't need to know that.
I'm not going there.
Not need to know that. What we need to know is it Oracle? Is it Access? What is it?
I mean, I don't think it really matters what it is. If there's responsiveness that we could tell them we want a query run for this information, you know, and have them give it to us. I'm not sure why it matters.
Yeah.
What the technology is.
I actually didn't see this when I first saw this slide, Henry, but I think this may actually be a menu or a map to some useful activities over the next couple of meetings. It may make sense for us to have each department describe their data. Just have the department head join us on a Zoom meeting and say, this is what the school department has got. This is what the building permit database looks like. This is what the information that's contained within the database.
Yeah, because ultimately, Jason, when we extract out, we'll probably extract out into a spreadsheet. That's typically what's done. And then analyze from there.
Yeah.
And we're probably talking about merging a lot of this in a way that allows people some functionality with it across individual repositories as well.
Yes.
If we're really looking for something usable to someone who doesn't work with, particularly someone who's not used to database management issues. And I'm also thinking a lot of this is going to come maybe from outside the town. If we're thinking like from RIDE or from other types of state level data repositories, and that is going to complicate things a bit. So maybe what we should also be looking at is what format would be the most useful for us, and then for if we're interested in transparency and dissemination, how do we make it accessible to other people?
Yeah. Well, Kristen, let me just give you. I've worked on a number of projects for the state of Rhode Island, having to do with databases, and if you can imagine it, what it's like is, if you walked into a gym that was loaded with file cabinets, and none of the file cabinets were labeled, and you said, "Oh, give me all of Henry Thayer's data." Well, it might be spread across 20 file cabinets. You know, that's how archaic some of the state structures are. I mean, I think that you've seen that.
Yeah.
You know, but
I do think that this is a
there yet.
I do think that this is a useful exercise. So let me suggest this. Henry and committee members, what are the data sets or the things, the rough information that you think we might have that would be interesting to have? Building permits, public safety data, zoning data, administration's a pretty broad category. What kinds of information would you like to know whether or not we've got? Because what we can do then is I can invite department heads to join us in a meeting to describe what they've got and how they've got it, what format it's in.
Yeah.
I don't think it's, something we should necessarily spend 2.5 hours discussing with the department head, but, just to get a sense of what the building permits, what the fields in the database are.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it would be interesting on building permits. Where are they being issued and for how much? Susan, rather, I'm sorry.
We have street data.
Yeah, Susan, I'm sorry, but it goes back to that question that you've asked on a number of occasions that said is, what about if we had a tsunami and everything south of Route 1 disappears? How much does that take off our tax roll?
That's not going to be the building permits data.
Well, it'll give you the value of whatever they're building.
No, it's not. Most of the stuff down there was built a long time ago, and that data aren't. Those.
And you got to go over to the tax rolls.
It's the tax roll. It's
the tax roll.
That's correct. Yeah. But I think that's a good exercise to go through, is to sort of develop a cosmology of the data environment here to understand what relates to what or what might relate to what. I think that is useful. So I'm happy to start bringing department heads in to describe their data sets.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Well, and it would also perhaps be useful to know how easy it is to query their data.
Yeah.
What's the
Yeah.
temporal domain of accessibility? How much of it is, because that also, I mean, data is only as useful as it is accessible, right?
Yep. So that's a really good point. And most of our databases are fairly young.
Sorry, guys.
They don't go very old. Most of our databases are going to be, you know, for the building permits right now, the online system data that we've got is probably 2 years old, 2 years old.
Yeah,
In terms of land records, which is probably our oldest electronic data, you're only talking the early 90s.
yeah,
Well, also need to think about the planning department, I would think, for data.
Yep.
What, do we, I keep asking about this, the seek, click, fix, substitute we have, what is it called? City X, City, there, don't we have some service that's attached to the website? I couldn't find it. But
Yeah, Civic, what is it? I know what you're talking about.
yeah, what are they, what's that? I couldn't find.
They don't have data. They're a, it's really just a set of online tools. It's a set of applications that will query data, but and pull data, and it's an engine for, it's a front end to data manipulation for members of the public. So in our case, we don't do Civic Plus or whatever the heck it's called.
Yeah.
Since we're not doing it, there is nothing there. There's no front end. We've never made use of the front end data query engine tool that we own. We simply put up our web page and left it at that. We didn't use the tools that came with it.
Well, we should know something about what those are. And I'm also surprised, I guess it's different from what I thought then. I thought there was some outreach to citizens to allow them to.
So yes, there's a reporting component of that, but the data are only generated when you've got the tool in place and the inquiries are being made by the public, or the complaints are being made. So since we haven't had a way for the public to file a complaint online, there's been no data generated, and there's nothing there.
Okay.
So there's a range of tools that are available for the web page that we've never implemented.
wow.
A bunch of tools that you know, so front ends for queries and ways for the public to send an email that gets converted into either a database file or a spreadsheet file that then goes to the department that needs to make the adjustment. So pothole on Main Street, Joe Blow, July 7th, 2020. That would be the file. Our folks would go out, they'd patch the pothole, they'd file, and they'd report to the same file. Pothole fix, July 8th, yada, 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 that kind of thing. Those data don't exist because we've never used that feature of the web page.
Okay, is there one more slide, Henry? Is there
Yes.
slide 6?
Yes. Okay, and I talked about potential first projects. Rob has got the tax calculator tool and potentially gathering of some COVID-19 data. Rob, go ahead. You already put a point in there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential first projects for this committee, and I think one of them is simply getting the roadmap to the data sets that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I think this is great that you've done this, Henry, but I think we've moved on from governance to something which the operation of the committee. So I think we should, if we want to talk about governance, maybe we should go back to the first 2 or 3 slides and decide whether that's what we, that one. This one.
Right.
I mean, I find it peculiar that Rob has to write the minutes for our meetings as the staff person attached to us.
Let me comment on that briefly, because part of why we are where we are is because of the incredible changes we've had down in the planning department. Historically, when Steve Alford was town manager here, the planning department did most of the committees.
Yes.
Responsible for most of the committees. When Chelsea left, I knew that we were going to take some time to do a search, so I took a number of committees on in the manager's office. This is not likely to be a situation that continues forever, although COVID has confused things. But the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which is currently being done in my office, the Sustainability Committee was being done in my office until recently, the Economic Development Committee, which is being handled in my office. All of those things will eventually find a home, which is more appropriate than my office. I do think that the SMART Committee, depending on how we evolve, how this evolves, is one that would make sense in the manager's office. So
Yeah, I agree about that.
The one committee here, eventually.
Okay. Well, then the only thing I would say here is take secretary off, because there is no secretary function, and just leaves chief technologist, because secretary is done by somebody else.
I do want to return back. I'm always the squeaky wheel. To some of our initial meetings, when we talked about the agenda setting function and whether or not we wanted to have that component. I do think there's some tension here with the committee setting the agenda and the collaboration with other committees. I'd like to raise that for discussion, because I know it's a sticking point that we've had multiple times. But initially, the vision for the committee was that we would not do what we wanted, but do what the town decided it needed. And there's a really distinct division between those things. The interest of having a transparent and credible data source is a bit at odds with choosing a project, given the type of polarization that we have around some of the issues in town. And so I would just like to throw that out there for discussion. I know we have a lot of people missing also tonight, which is concerning if we're wholesale changing the structure. I do think that we could use some herding as a collective group and some leadership, but that piece of it is at odds with the first 2 meetings where we discussed the role and structure of the committee. And it may even be a bit at odds with the mission of the committee that we identified in the last meeting.
I disagree with the characterization that there was never discussion of, never agreement that we could bring projects in for ourselves. I agree that we would take on issues from the town, but I don't agree that we ever agreed as a committee that we would not, be open to bringing issues in on our own.
Yeah, I remember that too. I think we were mostly going to try to be responsive, but we thought we also might be, part of our utility might be in suggesting ways in which the town could make use of a committee like this.
Yeah, Susan, it's been our collective experience, you and I especially, that when you go, if you talk to the council, I've been in a couple of the, when the committee meets with the town council, and they basically said, well, what do you think we should do? Or what do you think should be on your agenda? Or what do you think the projects could be?
So I do want to comment here that I think that there's a difference between the agenda that you have in mind and the agenda that Kristen may have in mind. In public policy, the agenda setting function is a large framing process. And we're meaning here the Robert's Rules of Order agenda, which is a narrower version of what that term entails. You're really talking about the order of the meeting. It's the things that will be discussed during a meeting. You're not talking about what shall we do as a body. You're talking about what will the order of business be at the next meeting.
Right.
So I will just say, I agree with that. I also think things appearing on the agenda is a piece of that public policy component, which is where my concerns, and I just have some reservations about, it would be nice to be effective, to be credible, to have the transparency and confidence in the findings of the committee, not be something that, oh, well, so-and-so's on that, so that must be what it is. And that's all I'm, and maybe I'm too academic, but I think that there is a really strong value in the potential peer review function of this committee, given the strength and depth of experience in a range of methodologies, and I'd really love to see that utilized.
I had made a suggestion when we had this discussion a couple of meetings ago, that I thought it was okay for this committee or the members individually to brainstorm or think of potential projects, but that we not action them on our own, but rather pass them to the town committee as suggestions to see what they might find useful, and then they could in turn direct us what they want. Because I understand Kristen's point to be apolitical and neutral, but I think that we could probably have some good ideas, and I don't want to stop us from having those types of brainstorming or thoughts about what we might do. But I do think it's a good idea to route it up to the town council for direction from them. That way we don't appear to be setting our own agenda.
No, but I like, go ahead. I would just, let me say, because my point's very small, I like the concept of some peer review. I think that's, I think that could be very useful to some of the other committees. And it can only be done if people feel that we don't have our own bone to pick, although you always do in peer review. But I think I hadn't thought about that for this committee, but I think that's a very powerful idea. I don't want to let that go.
Well, I think it also lends some credibility into the best practices interpretation of data and framing and even methodologies. So yeah, I think, I'm much more comfortable with the list going up to the town council and coming back to the committee than I have with the committee. We all can go rogue and do our own data analysis projects and place them in places where we want people to read them, should we wish to do that. But if we're operating under the auspices of the committee, there ought to be some input in terms of the priorities of the town council and other committees in terms of what they're asking.
I think that gets to that slide number 4, coordination with other committees, which is, I don't know that maybe there's a better way to phrase it, but we want to seek projects from other committees, let them know that we're available and that we're open for business, so to speak, to help them with projects that require data collection or data analysis. And I think maybe, I don't know if that's been done to any extent at this point with the town council or with any of the other committees. So I think maybe part of this is a little bit of a sales job, let people know that we're here and available and what we're tasked with doing.
Well, and I think there's also a really important element here about what resources are really required to answer some of the questions and how important are those questions, right? Like, what do you really need to do to conduct a credible survey? How do you execute that? These are maybe not experiences that everyone has, or any of the other types of metrics or issues. And so what is an easy question to answer? What is a really challenging question to answer? What can we answer? Those are all, I think, really useful things that this could support for a range of other committees.
Yeah, maybe as an extension of that, what, we could define sort of what we think are things that we can do that could be of service to other committees. What types of services can we provide? Because if we just say to other committees, hey, we're looking for projects.
One way to pursue that,
what we can do.
one way to pursue that set of activities would be to simply put together an offer letter. To simply say to committees and departments in town, the Statistical Modeling Committee is now up and running. We are interested in collaborating with departments and with other committees. If you have a project that you'd like statistical analyses or modeling done on, we'd love to talk to you. Yet, customers.
I think that even things as simple as what is this data, what can you use it for and what can't you use it for is also really helpful sometimes. Like, what are its limits? What is its quality?
What does it tell you? Or what can you read from it? That's important.
Yeah, it is occurring to me during the course of tonight's discussion that what we need is discussions. What we need is to get you guys talking with the people who own data, who are data custodians, and we need you to be talking to people who have questions or who are using data or who would like to use the information they've got, but they don't know what they've got. So in the one case, you're talking about Wayne, the building official, telling you about what his building permit database looks like. In the other case, you're talking about going to the sustainability committee and having a sort of open-ended conversation about what they wish they could track and puzzling through how that might happen, how they might come to understand what our recycling rate really is, for example. Because they're not used to designing a data collection program. They're not, don't do that.
And in some instances, there may be very reasonable proxy indicators that give you a gross assessment that's good enough for what the purpose is. And that would be really helpful to know too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking if we're looking along those lines, not all data has to be the best quality. It needs to be useful.
Yep. The best data are the data you got.
Refresh my memory, the town council was the one that put the interest in putting this committee together?
The town council's interest in having this committee come into being was that they recognized that there were places where, I don't want to be too critical here, but where representations about the meaning of information weren't great, and a sense that we could do better if we had models. So where did we have, I'm trying to think of the particular case where President Collins in particular was looking for a model.
Did it have to do with the school?
It was the tax issue. It was the tax model that we ended up putting together on the spreadsheet. They wanted to understand, what is the impact of an increase in taxes on various quintiles? What would, if you look at the the income quintiles, what's the impact on each of those groups? If we raise taxes by $100 per $350,000 home, what's that mean for people who are earning over $150,000? What does it mean for people earning 100 to 150, 75 to 100, et cetera? They were looking at wanting a model that did that. So they were looking for ways to understand the information that we've already got. And they were also looking for ways to make sure that we weren't getting survey monkey data presented as true representations of what's out there, what's believed, what's happening.
So forgive my ignorance, but that hasn't, I mean, I know that we haven't done that, but has that information been put together in one form or another at this point?
For what?
The tax implications.
Yes, what I produced and you guys reviewed several months ago now, I think gets at most of what they were looking for that purpose.
Did that end up getting disseminated out into the public? And
no, it did not. And we need to come back at some point and decide how that should be disseminated. We need to figure out what to do with that tool, because I still think that that's a useful tool. To be honest with you, with COVID, it was less relevant, and before COVID, it was too hot to actually get out there.
so that's a lesser interest of the town council right now?
No, I think that they'd still like to see that whole area explored better. I think that they'd like to have better tools, and there's certainly room for improvement on the little spreadsheet that we did do. I think that there is a need for understanding what the implications of increased fees and increased taxes are, because increases in taxes affect retirees different than they affect young working couples with 3 kids. And that matters, you know, figuring out how to sort of give some meaning to those differences, or to put some quantification to that is important.
All right. I guess I'd like to see, I think it would be, I mean, I understand, my guess is that the town council also does not want to appear political. I'm guessing they must have things on their mind. This is one. There may be other things.
Yeah, I mean,
but maybe they don't want to necessarily set the direction, but I wonder if somehow we can approach them to really see, like, what do they see are the most pertinent issues right now.
Yep.
That we can start to work on.
I think that there's I could give you a short list right now. The Sustainability Committee, if we work it through committees, let's try that for a minute. The Sustainability Committee's biggest project right now is community electric aggregation for communities. They have proposed to the town council that we purchase all of the energy for every resident and business in South Kingstown through the municipality, because municipalities have more leeway, they have more flexibility in the marketplace, and can get electricity at a lower rate than utility companies can. Municipalities can buy at any time during the year, on any day during the year. Utility companies are actually limited to purchasing, I think it's either once every 6 months or once every quarter. And they're locked into a particular date. And because the market knows that that's the date on which the utility company will be purchasing, in our case, National Grid, everybody knows the day on which National Grid will be buying its electricity for the quarter or the half year. And because of that, they don't get the best rates. Municipalities under federal law are allowed to purchase spot on the market anytime they want. And because of that, we can buy electricity cheaper, because we can look for the right time to buy. There are companies that have grown up taking advantage of that have gotten into the business of aggregating for municipalities going to the marketplace. The Sustainability Committee has been working with a company called Green Energy, which is doing spot market purchases for Barrington, Providence, Central Falls, and now South Kingstown, and they'd like to move us to a complete aggregated system.
They came to a town council meeting a few months ago, didn't they?
Yep, and it'll be back again at the next meeting. We don't have much data. I mean, and there hasn't been a whole lot of data analysis from the information that the Good Energy folks have done, or anybody. Nobody has looked at the whole energy market and really analyzed how good this is. What we've got are the data that are being pitched by the brokers who are in the business, and they have an interest in making their brokerage services look good. So the data that we're relying on are not necessarily the best data. They're the data that that an interested party has produced for us to use. Now, it's what we got. This would be an interesting thing for the SMART committee to look at from sustainability. On the Affordable Housing Collaborative, their biggest project right now is looking at possibly giving a property tax abatement for 5 years and up to 30 years for people who build affordable accessory dwelling units in their backyard. If you build a granny flat in your backyard and you're doing it for market rate housing, you get a 5-year tax break. We're not going to charge you taxes for 5 years on that property. If you are going to build it and make it an affordable housing unit, that is one that is designated for occupancy by a low income family, then you would have the tax abatement permanently for the duration of the housing, for the duration of the property's existence, the house existence. That's an interesting project. It's an interesting idea. It doesn't cost us anything because those properties don't exist right now, so that we're not giving up property tax, we're just foregoing future potential tax. There's some interesting policy benefits to that, but we haven't had a very good detailed analytical review of the long-term costs of a 5-year property tax abatement. How many units get built? What does it mean for traffic congestion? What does it mean for load on the schools? We haven't done those analyses because, again, that's beyond the capacity of that committee, and we don't really have anybody in town hall who steps up and says, oh, now that you've had this great idea, let us now dig in and figure out how to quantify that for 30 years. The Economic Development Committee has recently proposed that we establish a $250,000 fund to subsidize employment for youth in South Kingstown through the summer and fall. What are the economic benefits, and you know, does that make sense is a perfectly valid question for us to be asking. We are gonna be doing that more on gut than we should be anything else. The council will be reviewing that proposal at their next meeting. And there's not a whole lot of data that we've got or that anybody has analyzed to determine whether or not that makes a lot of sense, whether we could do more good by putting $250,000 in daycare. I mean, we just don't know. We haven't done that analysis. So again, that's a sort of thing that I think a quantitative and analytical, for that matter, qualitative analytical team could help puzzle through. It's those conversations that I'm finding tonight that I think need to be happening that just aren't. We need to introduce you guys to these topics so that you can figure out where value is added. What else have we got?
I suggest that if we can get kind of approval from those 3 committees, like you just gave us 3 ideas, great ideas. If we can get approval of the interest of those 3 committees, I think we might have our agenda set for the next year.
I think that's right, but there's a bunch of others. I mean, you know,
there's a lot of other stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are at some point looking at, if we look at the sort of big projects that are coming our way, or the big challenges that are coming our way 5 and 6 years down the road, the fact that we are relying on a volunteer fire company when volunteerism in America and Rhode Island, and I am loath to say it, but South Kingstown is on the downside of the curve. It doesn't look good for us in the very long haul to be relying on a purely volunteer company. The cost of going to a paid department is very expensive, and the implications in terms of distribution of resources to things like education are great. We don't have anybody really looking at those data. We've got a member we've got a member of the community who's now running for council who has done some very rough analyses, but I mean, in terms of a very detailed and systematic analysis of what the implications of going from volunteer to paid really are, we're not there.
And doesn't Narragansett have a paid fire
They do.
department?
They do.
And has anybody thought about whether we could combine our fire department with their fire department and what that would look like as part of the
Yeah,
bad thing?
the real challenge is that paying firefighters to be on duty 24/7 is expensive. It's very expensive in a community that is as geographically large as we are. We're the largest geographic area in Rhode Island. So we're really talking about, right now, the Union Fire District maintains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think it's 5, it may be 6 firehouses, and the Kingston Fire District, no, it's 6, plus the Kingston Fire District has got another 7 firehouses. So you're talking 7 firehouses, the equipment that sits in 7 firehouses, the staff that are sleeping in 7 firehouses. It's a very expensive proposition. It's not easy.
Right, and so how often do they get called? What are they, you know?
Well, that's another whole area of inquiry that would be worth diving into. We know their call rates. The question then becomes, where's value to be found in that data? You know, how do you stack the equipment? How do you staff the houses to make the best use of the resources? And they do that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a sort of art to this. There's always an art to the management of programs. There's also a science, and I would suggest that we're not doing as much science in this area as we could.
Is it possible that we could not just get the information in terms of empirical foundations from guiding decisions from committees, but also then kind of a priority list from both the committees? So many of them will have multiple needs, right? That's just the reality. But also from the town council in terms of where they identify, so that it's a kind of a combination of what I think Henry suggested, David suggested, in terms of putting things up to the town council, but also giving us, I mean, certainly there are things that we are more qualified to do, right? That our expertise will more naturally lend ourselves to, but potentially also making sure that we're addressing the needs of the town in the order of urgency, maybe, that they emerge.
Yep. So maybe this makes sense. Let me suggest this and see what you all think about it. Maybe it makes sense to have a work session with the town council. I don't know when it makes sense to have a work session with the town council. I'm not sure it's the most fruitful thing to do during a political season, but maybe in November.
Yeah.
It makes sense to have a discussion with the town council about the highest priorities and the biggest issues. I mean, I can tell you the biggest issues that get talked about are affordable housing, sustainability, and sort of climate change impact on the seashore stuff, educational sustainability, education program sustainability, and public safety, fire/EMS more than anything else. Those are the topics that are hot topics, or are the issues that probably keep people up at night. But it might make sense for us to have a work session with the town council and just talk through what it is they're looking to understand better, and see where the skills and the abilities of this committee mesh with the interests and questions of the council. And then it might make sense to go to each of the advisory committees that work in those areas: affordable housing, the Affordable Housing Collaborative, sustainability, the Sustainability Committee, and have a work session, a joint session with each of those groups. Pick 2 or 3 of them maybe, each of those groups and set your agenda that way for the year. So you're being driven by the large questions, the generalized questions from the council, and then specific input from the expert committees that have been thinking about this prior to your entering the discussion.
Then do we spend,
I would suggest, I know it is political season and I know that gets touchy, but I mean, I would suggest to see if the current town council is interested in starting that conversation. I know things could change with November, so maybe it's not the best idea. But I mean, I think that it seems like those are some of the big issues in town. So is the next council, if it is substantially different, are they really going to have much of a different viewpoint? And 6 months could go by,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So I'm certainly happy to ask the council whether, to make the request and say the committee has asked that we set up a 45-minute work session to talk about the issues that the council think would benefit from modeling and data analysis or data collection.
but I think it would be useful for us, or maybe I'm the only one who is I'm the most in the dark here, but I think it would be really useful if we did the first thing we were talking about based on Henry's slides, which is to try and get a little bit of a sense of what we have, what the town collects as data. I don't know, just so we could use, if we wait until November, we could use some time now just trying to figure out sort of what's available to us and thinking about, as Kirsten said, what's a proxy for what. And, I don't know, we could,
Yeah.
I feel like we don't really have a good handle. I mean, one thing I realized after listening to this meeting is I need to go back and read the budget again and see sort of how the town spends its money, how that's divvied up. But I think it would be helpful if we got some information about what kinds of things the town does know.
Yeah, and I'm happy to start those conversations. I can bring a couple of department heads in for each of the next couple of meetings, and you can get you can grill them about what they've got.
Yeah.
Well, some of this might be driven on what can we answer with relatively low effort pretty quickly too.
Yeah.
So knowing what data are out there.
Yeah.
So who would you want to hear from?
The first one I want to hear from is your IT person, because I want to understand what format is out there.
Yeah, but they're totally different. I mean, they're going to be very, very different databases. They're going to be all over the place. Our data infrastructure is a patchwork of spreadsheets,
Okay.
applications,
Always like that.
bases. I mean, it's all over the place.
Can I make just a thought that I had earlier when we were talking about this, is that I think there's sort of two maybe separate aspects to this. One of which, is what we're talking about immediately right now, which is, what data do we have? What format is it in? How is it accessible? How is it organized? That to me is more just sort of infrastructure. Like, what do we have? How is it organized? How do we access it? What can we do with it? And then on the other side is, what are the needs of the various committees that we're going to collaborate with and serve, and their needs may or may not be related to any of that data, may require a new data collection or identification of new data sets. So I kind of feel like there's an infrastructure component that we need to wrap our heads around to understand, what we have, where it is, how we access it, and how we use it. And then second is, what are our tasks? Where are they coming from? And do those tasks, can the questions be answered by the data we have, or do we need different data that needs to be gathered?
I think we're also, the most important thing for me is to know who to talk to find data. That I'm not sure that do the committees themselves manage their own data, or are they all pulling from a town source like the highway department or whatever it is?
So the real answer to that question is they're operating with data. That is the real answer.
What was that?
As most of the committees are serviced by the planning department, they don't have data.
Yeah, exactly.
They have support. They've got somebody who does the meeting minutes, but they don't have data.
Yeah. So I think that's the first step, is to figure out not just what the data is, but where it is and who we need to contact to, you know, and do the people in those departments have the time and expertise needed to to access their own data. You know?
One way to approach the problem would be to bring each of the department heads in and say, if we were to make an application under the APRA, under the Access to Public Records Act, what would we be able to get from you?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Because, you know, I've run into, for instance, at the school department, as they've changed personnel, their responses to APRAs have become more legalese, and, you know, we're only going to give you exactly what we have to, and not put it any, you know, previously they were willing to go to longer lengths to provide data. And I have a feeling it's the personnel that are new, who maybe aren't fully familiar with the data that they have.
So to Henry's point, it is important to know enough about the data set so that you can make an intelligent APRA request, if that's what you have to do. I mean,
Yep.
You have to know what's there so you can ask for the right stuff.
Yeah, and also to answer the question is, how much ad hoc processing is going on out there? You know, like a department manager may build an ad hoc database.
Yeah, the answer is it gets used all the time, but it's not very, it gets used, we pull data for our purposes. The way bureaucrats use databases and spreadsheets is to make a case. And it's used in a very deliberate way. You know, we need to show that the program is successful. So we show that last year we only had 500 participants in the program. This year we have 600 participants in the program. Voila, that sells up in a spreadsheet. That's how data gets used. That's how data gets used in bureaucracies. I mean, that's not surprising. So it's ad hoc analyses more than it is, and it's not detailed. It's not serious multi-year analyses. It's 1 year over another, that kind of thing.
A tangent, but I just want to state for the record, working off of what Jason said, is I found with the previous administration, trying to get information that I was interested in was impossible. So I think a lot of it just depends upon what people are working on and interested in.
Yep, I think that's probably true. I think that it's probably true that what you ask is as important as anything else. If you're asking the question the right way, you're likely to get a better answer than if you don't. And the right way isn't, you know, it's a matter of hitting the audience right as well. I mean, I see APRA responses all the time that simply say, we do not have data that can comply with your request because the request was deficient in the way it was formulated. And if you add 3 words or you shift, you know, you're thinking about how you read the question, you understand what they're getting at. But, you know, you ask the wrong date, the wrong, we don't collect data from, you know, July 1 to August 1, therefore we don't have the data. We collected on June, starting on July 3rd. So you asked for data we don't have, sorry, life's hard. I mean, we're not that silly.
Yeah.
You know, how you ask the question matters. And it's not a defense mechanism. I mean, you know, one of the things that folks tend to think about APRA is that bureaucrats are looking for ways not to be responsive. They're not. They're just looking for ways to not have to go through an extraordinary effort in order to help you do your analysis. It's that rather than, you know, if you ask the right question and it's easy to answer, you're going to get the answer. You're going to get the
I'd have that conversation with you over a cup of coffee sometime.
Well, how are we doing on our agenda? Have we accomplished enough things? Are we going to Kirsten's point, are we going to take Henry's useful work but not make a decision tonight because we aren't very many people? So not make a decision about governance and then,
Well, I think we do have a quorum, but I think it would be good to give the other 3 members the benefit of seeing what Henry produced and what we discussed.
Henry, I do want to say I really appreciate your taking the lead on this. I think you have given us the largest boot forward into efficacy that we seriously needed, and I think it's going to really help shape what we can accomplish as a committee. So I do really appreciate that you mobilized us. But I also do agree I would like to see given what the other folks on the committee.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Kristen.
We can put this on the agenda for the next meeting, and if a motion is made at the next meeting, maybe I don't have to worry about tracking things down at the meeting after that one. Whatever works.
Hey, Robert, are the videos of these meetings available after the?
They should be. I don't know where. I've seen them, but I've seen them because I used them for the meeting minute production. In fact, there's a transcript that gets generated from these meetings, and I've used that, which is a nice feature as well. But where they are, I don't know because I've not gone searching for them. I go to our P drive, our shared drive.
Gotcha.
It would be useful to direct the folks who couldn't come to perhaps see the discussion so that we don't have a repetition of the conversation if they're able to, but that would be a useful, is that where you were going with this, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, there's at least 4 or 5 people, right? At least for this meeting.
So I mean, I think in the future, I would really like that in the event that I miss something. I think it would be particularly helpful. So
I'll follow up and make sure that they get posted.
Thank you, Rob.
Not posted. I think they are posted automatically. I just don't know where.
well, I think it might be good if we instructed or suggested to the people who aren't here that this came up and we wanted their input before we made a decision. So would they please spend time looking at the first, I mean, maybe Colleen could say we wandered off into some other things. So maybe they just have to look at the first 15 minutes or something. I mean, they could look at all of it obviously, but around the governance question, we mostly did that at the top of the meeting.
Right. So to your question, Susan, about how we're doing on the agenda included the following items. Committee governance, mission of the committee, which you've certainly talked about tonight, coordination with other committees, which you've talked about tonight, tax calculator tool, which I've sidestepped tonight. I'm happy to talk about it in more detail, but there's been no progress with it. It's not gone anywhere since you last saw it. Need for your data repository, which I think you've actually devised a strategy around, which is to get to the data owners rather than trying to get to the data. And I think that actually is better. It makes sense to understand from the data owners what they've got, how long it's been around, that kind of thing, rather than trying to pull everything in without that context. I think it makes sense to have a conversation about it. And COVID-19 related data needs. I will tell you, I was thinking about this issue and what we might be able to tackle or what we might be able to do about it coming into this meeting. And I just don't know. I mean, I just don't know where to begin with COVID-19 at this point anymore. There's just so much data. There's just so much coming at us. And there's so many blind spots as well. I just don't know how to begin defining what would be useful for South Kingstown that isn't already being produced by the CDC or isn't already being produced by the Rhode Island Department of Health or isn't already being produced by the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency. And to be honest with you, I'm not altogether sure how valuable even those data that are coming at us from those entities is. It's a really I mean, we're swimming in data, and we've got these vacuoles throughout the pool. It's a terrible environment. So I'll stop talking about COVID-19. If anybody's got thoughts.
Well, one thing I heard about some of the data that are being gathered is that it's mostly done by zip code. So it seemed to me that since we're all one zip code,
We're not
one zip code.
Well, no. Not only not one zip
Three.
code.
Oh, actually, I do know that. I'm sorry.
Not only are we not one zip code, our zip codes don't correspond to town lines. I'm in the Saunderstown zip code. So that when we have reported cases, they may be West Kingstown. I'm not in that zip code. West Kingstown zip code includes Richmond. So you may actually have a reported case that's a West Kingstown case that's actually a Richmond case.
Oh, okay. So I was going to say a different thing, but I still think then the information isn't going to be very. I don't see how we make use of it, but anyway, that's just what I understand from the CDC's gathering, and that's just information I gather about who has been tested and who has been positive and who has been negative. And I'd be interested to know some other things too, like what has this meant for the more vulnerable portions of our population or something. I mean, I don't know what we would do with that information, but I just think it would be important to know. Yeah. But I'm not going to make any case for it. I think we've got plenty to do here.
Rob, one possibility, if you were interested, you say you've got a lot of data and you're not really maybe quite sure how to analyze it, what to do with it, or what questions you're trying to answer. One approach could be to go back and look at all the executive orders that have been issued in South Kingstown regarding COVID-19 and see what kind of data would you need and what kind of data analysis would you need to see if those executive orders had the intended effect.
So that's good. So let's take an example or a couple of examples. There's an executive order out there that waives the penalty and suspends the enforcement of the plastic bag ban. We're not enforcing the plastic bag ban. And we're not enforcing the plastic bag ban because in March and early April, the retailers, mostly the grocery stores, said they couldn't get plastic bags, that the supply chains had been interrupted, and that
couldn't get paper bags.
They couldn't. I'm sorry, that's right. They couldn't get paper bags. So they were sending people out without any bag whatsoever. We said, all right, you can use plastic. They are continuing to do that, and they will do that for as long as we let them, because paper's way more expensive than plastic, and they prefer to use plastic bags. I suspect that the supply chain issue is no longer significant. I haven't done any research to find out what anyone's saying about that, but I suspect that the issue has been resolved. It would be nice to be able to put together a little piece on it. There's no data need though. That's just doing some market research and finding out what's happening in the marketplace. We require masks. Again, I'm not sure what we add with local data on masks. Our incident rate, our infection rate is so small. I don't think there's anything for us to do with regard to masks. We require social distancing as the state requires it. Again, there's just not much for us. I can't find a way for us to deal with the inputs that make sense for us locally. I just don't know what to do with a statistical analysis locally that's going to improve what we're doing on the ground. Does that make sense? I mean, I just don't know what, what there is to be gained here. This one just seems to be a set of situations that is going to be, we're going to be best informed by sort of the gross data coming out of the state, coming out of the CDC, and being smart about what could happen. I mean, there's some probability analysis that could be done, perhaps. What's the probability that Texas impacts South Kingstown? Yeah, I just don't know that there's anything there for us.
You drive around and count license plates.
Yeah, but I do. We all do. I mean, how aware have you become of the New Jersey and Connecticut and New York plates? You do.
We're aware of them all the time because I live along between House Road. They're all over the place down here.
I think I've become more aware of them in the last 3 months than I was, 6 months ago, though. But
Do you know offhand how many cases South Kingstown has had cumulatively now?
total number is in the hundreds still. I want to say it's about 8 or 9.
100? Really? Oh, I didn't think it was that high.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is who tested positive, right, Bob?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Well, tested positive or presumptive positives.
Because I've been looking at the Rhode Island COVID-19 data site, and it has a much smaller number than that on there.
It's like 90 or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
On the Rhode Island COVID-19 website, where they have a whole bunch of data presented in various forms, one of them is number of cases by town, and it was something much lower than that. It was in the 90s for a long time. It might be above 100 now, but
So maybe I'm just getting my numbers mixed up here.
okay.
It was hundreds.
So my point was going to be, if that is in fact the number, something around 90 or 100, or maybe it's a little bit higher than that now. In terms of gathering data or doing data analysis, in a town of 30,000 people, it's virtually the null set.
Yeah.
It's just such a small number that there's not really a lot to do with it.
Yeah, 90 is low. Let's
I'll look at that right now.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me bring it up.
While we're doing that, I just have 2 things that might be worth thinking about moving forward. One is, I think it would be really useful for the town to have a data connection around this with URI, and given that it looks, I'm guessing that that is more likely to expand some of this population than many other sources. And I'm guessing that their surveillance and structure will be pretty robust. But that it's certainly going to be in the town, but also have an impact beyond that. And so it would be really nice if some of that lift could come from there, if they're tracking really closely, at least with the campus community. And the second thought I did have is just this is an aside, but I do want to just put it on the back of people's heads for next time. Henry, I really like the structure that you're identifying. I'm concerned that chief technologist position is going to be an overwhelming amount of work depending on what we design around that. And so just maybe some ways to manage or think about that. And maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like that could be a lot of work for somebody if it's, integrating, presenting, transparency, any of those kind of data functions. So just a thought.
Maybe it's more than one person, Kristen.
Or
Kristen.
differently, maybe it's data liaison or something, something a little different. Did you find it?
I don't want everyone to run away from it.
No, I'd actually volunteer to do a good part of that. I have some database building experience.
Great.
Right. So what did you find, David?
92.
I'm sorry?
92.
92.
Yeah, as of 6/29.
So why do I have 900 in my mind? I can't understand what that is. Okay, well, I don't know.
Well, it could, they say that, I've seen some
Oh, you know what it
statistics
is?
that they feel they get about 1 out of 10
That's
cases.
probably what I was.
So there was a big conspiracy going. There was a conspiracy theory going around that around certain numbers that if you type them into Google, you would get COVID numbers from somewhere in the world, and it was just this whole big innumeracy thing that people didn't realize that there's all this data, and if you put any number in, you're going to get thousands of hits of, this number of people were positive on this day in this town in some country. So.
Yeah, I don't think I was just doing the detection multiplier, David. I've got some other thing going on in my head. I don't know what it was. But the detection multiplier would put us at about 900.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Well,
The one last that you need to do before you do that is set the last meeting, which is the Thursday at 7 or 7:30.
Oh, wait, are we, yeah.
Okay.
So I thought we were 7, but it looks like
thought it
the
was
notes say 7:30.
yeah, I thought we were 7 too. I thought there was some pushback about 7:30, but
Well, I went back and
Past
looked.
my
at-
bedtime.
I went back and looked
Ah.
at the-
I'm happy with 7.
the
Rob.
transcript suggests 7 was the consensus.
Yeah.
But it says 7:30 in the minutes.
Yep, it does. So I will change that, actually. I'll go back and get that.
Also in the minutes, I believe in terms of attendance, Jocelyn was at the last meeting. She's
Oh, you're right. She did. She
quoted
did.
in the minutes.
I'll add her as well. All right.
all right, so the 4th Thursday is a what day?
It's the 3rd Thursday, no?
4th,
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 Sorry.
Thursday of the month.
the 30th, July 30th.
July 30th. Okay,
I hope you all stay healthy and well.
Thank you.
23rd. The fourth Thursday is the 23rd.
Oh,
Okay.
hmm.
So,
Is it the 4th Thursday or the last Thursday?
no, the 4th Thursday, he's right. It should be the 23rd then.
23rd of July?
Hmm.
yes,
All
That's
right.
3 weeks from today.
You guys good with that?
yes.
Is the criteria that it's the 4th Thursday or the last Thursday?
No, we said the 4th, but
Okay.
maybe most people were thinking it would be the last.
Probably.
I don't know.
We're going to set it for the 23rd of July.
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay, yes, everybody should stay well.
Stay well.
Stay well.
Long weekend.
All right. Take
Right.
care, guys.
Yeah,
Aye.
don't do anything. Okay, are we finished?
Yes.
Good night.